Welcome everybody. Steve with Such Fidel. I'm coming at you with a sort of book review. It's a manual, but also an introduction to the procedure for it. Anyway, welcome to the program, Dr. Dan Schneider. How you doing, man?
I'm doing outstanding. How are you today? Thanks for having me on the show, by the way, brother. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you saying yes. So Dan is with a couple other friends and Father Ripper with the Liber Christo project, movement, whatever you call it, program, the method, and they came out with a book, The Field Manual for Spiritual Combat. So first off, again, tell us a little bit about yourself and what is the Liber Christo method per se.
Yeah, so I started it's about 8 years ago. I was asked to be involved in a local team, and the diocese was forming an exorcist team, and a friend of mine was being named the exorcist, and he asked me to get involved. At the same time, I had just started my doctoral studies, so I had this super rationalistic biblical studies focus in the mornings, and then we would go to these crazy, anything goes sessions in the evenings. It was kind of an interesting dichotomy of my life. And so the first time I had been in session, I'm also a combat veteran. I flew Cobra attack helicopters in the Gulf War, and so I'm a military guy at heart. Grew up in Ohio. I was a boxer. So when I saw the beauty, I mean, at first you hear all this stuff about exorcism and what, all the phenomena associated with it. But when I saw how liturgical it was, how beautiful it was, this was the straight up from the heart of the church, imposition of the authority of the church in the cosmos. The air just rarefied, and it was like being in Iraq again at one level, but it was very holy. And so it kind of brought together all my military background, my experience fighting and athletics and sports and these other things, combat sports, and also my theological training. It all kind of cohesed together, and it was a very interesting experience. And from that point on, I just started working closely with Kyle Clement and Father Ripperger, and to progress the development of the 4-phase protocol of Father Ripperger, and the manual is actually phase 2 of the 4-phase protocol. So it's just kind of a development over time, how this book came about, and it's kind of, I bring in a lot of military elements into the book, try to make it interesting.
So you didn't think that going into this was you were sitting down with a demon on the other side and going, Colonel Jessup, did you order the code red? Was that
exactly
going in?
Yeah. No, I didn't. No, I didn't see that. But there's some humor. When I teach at parishes and other things, I always use some humor because I think you should take what you do very seriously, but don't take yourself seriously, because the demon always tries to focus back on you or on him. And there was a video one of my army buddies sent me, and there were these three, I think they were cab guys. They were in a firefight in Afghanistan, and the rounds are hitting the rock behind them. And one of them tells a joke, and they all start busting out laughing. And it isn't that they're not very serious about they're getting shot at. They're in a with but sometimes soldiers use humor to offset the tension of combat. And so oftentimes I'll use humor, with various cases and what we do, just to keep it light. Because what the devil would really like us to do is to get so focused on him and be just such sour pusses. He doesn't want us to be human. And we're dealing with the cases, I've been dealing with cases now for 8 or 9 years. There's a consistent pattern, and he just grinds them down. He beats the humanity out of them, and they become so hyper focused on themselves and on the devil, they lose sight of Christ. And really, as we say in this ministry, the demon is tertiary in Catholic liberation. First and foremost is Jesus Christ. How do we get souls reclaimed, restored to Christ? And that's the definition of Catholic liberation, restoration with God the Father through Jesus Christ. And that the first focus is Christ. The second focus is, what are the obstacles to grace that keep me from being united with Christ? And so, and that's what the manual does. It helps us to identify what areas of this person's life do I have, is the enemy getting a holding point in my life? Is there some habitual sin? Is there some heresy that I'm believing? Is it, and basically learning to identify clean from unclean. That's Catholic discernment. And that's what we try to do in this book, is help people identify, hey, that's not clean. That's not clean sex. That's not clean thinking. That's not clean prayer, right? That's not clean liturgy. So getting people to clean from unclean is very critical, and bring them on the path to holiness of thought, word, and deed. Ultimately, that's the goal: holiness of thought, word, and deed.
In the is it the Ford? The introduction, I think it's the intro. Father Ripper talks about case study. I guess you guys got like 15,000 emails or messages a month or a year or whatever it was, the number, but maybe 3 are worth pursuing or something like this. So is this more like for, because people might be looking at you like, I would be like Dr. Dan here. I would be like, how can I sign up for this? Are you more, is what's going on here, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of like going to a doctor's office? I go up and I see you, tell you what my symptoms are. And if I'm at the level needing surgery, I get to see Father R for maybe like an exorcism or assist, but you're giving me prescriptions to be able to cure what my ailments are.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like, and the statistic that he used that year, they had 600 legitimate, what they figured verifiable cases. And of the 600, now I want to say it's something ridiculous, like 800 a week inquiries now, what they're getting, because the evil has just been unleashed in the world. So we're just getting more and more cases. But 600 cases, only 3 were actual cases of possession. The bulk of people can self-deliver. Once you get to a high level of oppression and low level of possession, sometimes the weight of the church needs to come to bear. But most people need to get cleaned up. When I first started this, we would work in a Roman model, which is just pray everybody, just gunsling. And I would sit down and I would do the prep work for the priest, and I would say, hey, if they see the priest, they manifest. So the priest is in the sacristy, the lay team is there, and I get them ready for the prayer session. I'd say, hey, did you go to mass this weekend? Oh, no, the demon won't let me. Did you go to confession? No, the demon won't let me. Priest comes out, you pray for this person. Their soul is not in a state of grace. The soul cannot receive, doesn't have the merit to receive, technically speaking. You get a lot of movement, you get a lot of activity, but no liberations, because the soul's not in a state of grace. They're not in a habitual state of grace. So the protocol was kind of born out of that movement. And I tell people that this medical model, Father, the exorcist he's the brain surgeon, the heart surgeon. The parish priest is the pastor. He's the general practitioner. And then the lay associates, we're the staff, we're the nurses. And I tell them, I'm Nurse Ratchet. You got to do this stuff before you get to see the priest. You've got to get ready. It's like that TV show, My 600-Pound Life. I don't recommend it. I've just seen clips of it, but there's a metaphor. Okay. So on this show, you have to weigh 600 pounds or more to get on the show. And they're going to offer you free bariatric treatment, surgery, etc. And so you have to get your weight under 450 pounds. And for 2 reasons. One is your body may not be able to sustain the surgery at 600 pounds. You need to get under 450 to make it sustainable and survive the surgery. And the second is you have to establish a habit, dietary habits, exercise habits. You have to have the skill set for success. Otherwise, you have your surgery and then you go home and you tell your kids, hey, take me over to Wendy's so I can get my biggie fries, right? And pick up a Meat Lover's pizza on your way home. You have to get the habits established. And so most people that come to the diocese, to the church, to the society for help, they're spiritually, they're 600-pound overweight fat slobs. They have no discipline at all in their spiritual life. So the first phase is a 30-day prayer discipline that people go on and do set prayers. It's kind of like a PX90 for a short burst to reestablish a prayer life, pull back from the world, detach from social media, and do set prayers 3 times a day. And a lot of people just self-deliver just by getting order back in their life. And they're going to confession every week. They're learning to pray. And then the second phase is this manual, which anybody can do. Anybody can do. And the manual basically is one long deep dive general confession and teaching Catholics how to pray. As much as I love your podcast, this is not prayer. So a lot of Catholics think if I listen to Catholic podcast or read about prayer or about saints, that's prayer. No, prayer is communion with God. Saint Teresa of Avila says, converse with him who dwells within, his majesty within, with his majesty within, teaching people to pray, starting with vocal prayer and then mental prayer, meditation. This is absolutely critical as it ties into our self-mastery in controlling the diabolic projection. So all this stuff is very critical. State of grace, learning to pray. This is very critical for Catholics in spiritual combat, and it's very much overlooked. Most places, you say you hear the demon, they just start praying for you, and that doesn't work. It might light things up, but in the long term, it's not sustainable.
That was a good way to bring up P90X, because that's a home-based workout. No one knows what they meant by that, and it has there's a manual inside it, tell you how to eat, how to work out, when to rest, how to rest, all that stuff. So that was a good comparison, because that's the manual, and what you guys are doing at Liber Christo, pretty much the same thing. How to do this, how to do this. Here's when to do it. You get the specifics like the Angelus 6-12-6, when to do certain prayers. You're giving them a regular in a sense, right?
Yeah. We were talking beforehand about that. You were an athlete. I was an athlete. You don't show up one day and say, gee, I want to be a college athlete. I'd love to do that. It takes grind. And there's certain things that you do. Nolan Ryan, this is one of my favorite stories, Nolan Ryan. I'm sure he was probably one of your heroes growing up. He threw I forget, it was his last game. He threw a no-hitter. And he was done after this game, and he throws a no-hitter, and they had a big party for him afterwards. And he had a routine that he after every game. He did this. He did a certain amount of icing and stretching, and he did a certain amount of minutes on the exercise bike to keep his muscles. He's in his which at the time seemed super old, but he was like 44 something. You'll probably know the story better than me. And everybody is waiting to congratulate this guy. I think it was the 7th no-hitter, and they're like, "Hey, where's Nolan?" And so he's doing his routine. He finishes the game and he does this and this and this. And that routine is critical for success on the playing field. That routine is critical. We had it in the military, standard operating procedures. I could still move my feet and arms. I would sit when I was learning to be a pilot, a helicopter pilot. There's certain movements we would do. We would have a toilet plunger in this hand, and you sit on the toilet and you put a toilet plunger in this hand and a broom stick on this hand, and you would do this, because when you move your cyclic forward, the collective comes back and the right foot goes down, the left foot goes up. There's a certain bodily mechanics to it. You just had to practice that so your body recovered. Pitching, same mechanics every single way. Grab the ball in the same way every single time. Mechanics are important for success on the battlefield and on the playing field. Why do we think that there's no mechanics to prayer? There's no mechanics to the spiritual life. So getting people back into that order. 8 out of 10 people live just by doing the phase 1 protocol and going through this catechesis, that the phase 2 catechetical reading. They're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I could do that. That makes sense. I need to confess that, So that's part of it, is identifying obstacles to grace. Where in my life am I blocked? Is grace being blocked? What are the mechanics of prayer? Getting back and reordering your life to prayer. Not just, I'm going to do 10 minutes in the morning or listen to a podcast on the way to work. Actually spending time in prayer with God is absolutely critical.
Yeah, we met Robin Ventura after Nolan punched him in the face a couple. That was
was classy, man. He put him in an old school playground headlock. You know what I mean?
Come at me. Come on. You're going to charge it. You're going to pay that price. And,
yeah. Just because he's a pitcher doesn't mean he's the softy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But no, you brought up
I grew up I'm an Ohio boy, and I grew up Pete Rose all the way.
We grew up. My mom's from Cincinnati. My dad's from St. Louis. So we wrote Cardinals and Reds, and I pretty much got the most Pete Rose autographs you can. I'll tell you the Pete Rose story after when we're off camera on it.
Yeah.
But but you brought up the aesthetics on that. Not the aesthetics, asceticism.
Yeah.
Because there's how many spiritual writers talk about that? We'll eat. The athletes we eat right, sleep right, get the right exercise in. We're focused on every movement of our body or through every second of the day. What's going in, what's going out. You see the pros now, they buy these incubator things to sleep in. They're trying to get tip-top shape. But we go into spiritual where it's like, ho-hum.
God knows my intentions. He knows that and the thing is, the demon only works he never works in the subjective. As you know, Father Ripperger defines the devil as a lawyer from hell. And he's very strictly bound by the natural law within which he was created, but he only works in the objective. But we like to think in the spiritual life, we'll have discipline in every aspect of our lives. We'll have discipline. But when it comes to spiritual life, like you say, oh, God knows my intentions. He knows I'm good. He knows what I mean well. But the demon works very exacting, very exacting. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a case and we're sitting down and there's all kind of garbage going on. So I say, there's a couple there, they're in their late 30s. And I say, all right, how many kids you got? Well, we've got 2 kids. That's how long you've been married. We've been married 20 years. That's how you're married 20 years and you've got 2 kids. You probably use contraception a lot of your marriage. Is that correct? Yeah, we did. I said, okay. She said, but we realized it was wrong. So we stopped doing that. And we now started doing natural family planning. I'm like, outstanding. So have you confessed it? Well, I forgot. So objectively speaking, it's not confessed. God knows my intention, knows I'm sorry, but the demon will hold on that because he plays by the rules that God has established. The soul must be reconciled first to the sacrament of confession to be more receptive to the merit that is offered through the church's prayer or through the sacrament. So that's kind of a typical example that the demon will block us from confessing. He'll block us from confessing certain mortal sins. I have a priest that friend of mine in Ohio, actually, a good smash mouth Catholicism priest in the diocese, Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and he'll do little binding. I bind any demon that will block the memory of any penitent that comes in that try to confess today. And so I suggested they try to do that, and he said that the quality and quantity of confessions has like magnified the quality of confessions, and a number of people come into confession because when you go to confession, the demon often will block he'll block your memory. So having the priest do that was a very effective tactic that works. And so, but the demon will do everything he can to try to create a sacrilegious confession. If that makes sense.
Yeah, because I think Father Mueller writes about that in his confession book about the seeing a penitent walk in and like a demon's in his mouth trying to keep whatever's coming out, keep it in.
Yeah.
Obviously inverting the shame, and you don't have shame when you're committing it, but then you'll have the shame in the confessional line. Gets the whole inversion thing. But I can't remember the saint story that he brings up, but it's the lady walks in and he can see the demon holding on to whatever she's trying to get out and won't let it out till he ended up saying a prayer or something, and she was able to not blurt it out, but he was able to get it off her chest. And he kind of writes a great thing about confession in the book of the Exorcism of Nikolai Aubrey, which anybody want to publish that thing, sell a million copies. I guarantee it. I don't know if you ever read that.
We work on it together. That's a good idea.
It's already printed. It just needs to get published.
Oh, okay.
But the demon's manifest looks down the front row, sees little Johnny sitting there. And he goes, "Hey, John, I remember you. We had a good time last night." Rattles off everything he did. And Johnny runs into the confessional, comes back, and the priest goes, "You see Johnny now?" He goes, "Johnny, where you go? Is that you?" And it's just the whole thing he goes shows how great confession is, because the demon didn't even recognize him anymore.
Right.
From coming out of the confessional.
Yeah, what attracts the demon to us, number one, is anything that's inconsistent with the indelible mark of baptism. He knows who's baptized and who's not. I can tell you in session, the demon he's an apex predator. And he scans the room and he knows where the threat is. He normally doesn't even recognize, he doesn't even see the lay team members. He sees the priest with fear, absolute fear and trembling. What's interesting is I've been in session where we've had consecrated religious, virgin consecrated religious sisters, and it's an interesting reaction. He sees the priest as he's the guy with the belt, right? Mm-hmm. But he looks at the woman religious and what are you going to do with that, right? Like, is it safe? Like, this is a piece of a weapon of torture to the demon, the virginal, the consecrated religious. I can even tell you I work closely with monastic orders for prayer, and we have Carmelites on a regular basis here in our diocese, and they're praying by name for the cases, and I'll say to one of the energumen, "Hey, hang in there, man. Just keep praying, keep doing the work. Do the work. Your liberation will come, but keep doing the work." And don't worry, we've got the Carmelites. The Carmelites are praying for you. You got a lot of people praying. The Carmelites are praying. And every single time when I'm dealing with a highly obsessed or possessed person, when I say the word Carmelite, that they're praying for you, I see a little eye flicker, and you get this little shot of both fear and anger at the same time, because they know it's the weight of the church, the power of the virginal consecration, and complementing the power of the priesthood. This is deep level spiritual warfare that gets uncovered. That doesn't happen on a weekend trip, at a parish hall or Wednesday night. This is the ground and pound that it takes to get liberation, and it brings in the whole mystical body. That's the beauty about it. The whole.
I think you bring that up in one of the opening chapters about kind of like, well, you can bring that up in military too. You're never by yourself. There's always a team around you.
Yeah. So you have the whole mystical body. You've got the angels, the saints. People. They get focused on what the devil, but the devil, as Father Ripperger points out, is quite boring. He does the same things. What's interesting is when you learn the glory of the church, the glory of the Virgin Mary. We were in session not long ago, and the demons manifesting. But manifesting means they take over the person's body, and they start appropriating their senses, and the priest is invoking. We're doing a litany to the Blessed Mother, and he's invoking, the Virgin Mary commands you, etc. And the demon says, "Oh, her! Every time you call her, she comes. She puts her mantle around you." Right. So those are the little nuggets you get. Those are the nuggets you get to see the glory, the depth. I mean, my ecclesiology. I mean, I've got years of theological studies. My ecclesiology was purified by working and seeing the power of the priesthood. Just holding a picture up of the local bishop, the priest will say, "All right, hold a picture of the bishop up." And you hold the picture of the bishop up, and you watch. It's like a gut punch. It's like waterboarding for the demon to see. Then the priest will say, "I want you to fix her eyes upon the prince of the apostles in this diocese," and seeing the diabolic reaction will change the way you talk about your bishop and relate to your bishop. It'll purify your ecclesiology, whether you like his politics or not. It'll purify it.
I literally was just thinking,
hold my picture up, won't do a thing. I'll hold your.
If you're trashing, you start trashing him. You're doing what the demon's doing. Then
you're doing what the demon does. You're undermining his authority. You're trashing. Yeah, you're trashing a prince of the apostles. And so always, you learn to deal with respect with these guys, even and learn to pray for them more, because it must be a really difficult task to be a bishop, as you can imagine. Augustine and others wept when they were asked to be a bishop.
Yeah. No, I'm not doing it. I will stay here. I'll hold on to the table or whatever. You're not going to exile. They find him in a cave or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine the guys that want to say, "I want to be bishop." Like, okay, those guys don't need to be bishop. Kind of like in secular world, I want to be the leader. Oh, maybe that guy should be it.
Yeah. I always tell people the only job you start at the top is a ditch digger, right? And and the only qualification that disqualifies you from being on a team is anybody that wants to be on a deliverance team or an exorcist team are automatically disqualified. So this is certainly not something that I would volunteer to do. It's something that Our Lady will call you to if that's what she wants. But if you have a curiosity about it, it's very dangerous, And again, you're focusing too much on there's a lot of focus on what the devil's doing, and a lot, even in Catholic circles, it's all about the devil. In a certain, the exorcists that are talking a lot. It's great. We got to know tactics and that sort of thing, but we can lose focus. And what I love about Father Ripperger is that, I mean, he's a theologian, a philosopher in the Thomistic tradition, and he teaches more than just what the devil's doing, and I do the same. I do scripture, I teach at Franciscan, and I have an adjunct professor job there, and so it just enriches all that you do. The mental health professionals that get involved, it really enriches what they're doing. It helps them once you begin to see the human person from St. Thomas's view. Every single mental health professional that works with us, it just blows open their practice. They're able to go to a depth of healing that they couldn't do before with the modern understanding of the human person. As a theologian, it's the same thing. My understanding of the scriptures has just been blown open. When you read, for example, you see in a session, and you'll read the litany of saints, and certain reactions certain saints cause a certain reaction. It'll blow open your understanding of the mystical body and the saints. Certain readings, the reading of Elijah, when he defeats the prophets of Baal, and you watch the physical, visceral reaction at the projection of the word of God in Scripture. And you'll see a visceral, physical reaction of the death of Jezebel. I mean, I've seen it again and again and again. The Scriptures, this is not a dead letter. This is the word of God. That God, St. Paul says, God breathed, theopneustos. He breathes his life into this, and you begin to see the dimensionality. And this is what working in this industry has done. This business has done for me. It's really helped. It's like the Scriptures, and I'm a Scripture scholar, but the Scriptures are just taking a new level of meaning. It's like the children's book. When you open it and the pages pop out. It becomes there's a dimensionality to the faith that comes. And that's the positive side of working erstwhile as cosmic garbage men for that people in this ministry. That's kind of what we are. It's like Men at Work. Remember that movie?
Yep.
Yeah.
There was another movie that brought to my mind. You brought up the Scripture part with demons. Conjuring. I can't remember which one. They locked up the possessed doll or whatever it was in a room and put the word of God, put Scripture pages around the walls and the door, kind of like he boxed it in. And I remember my brother going, that actually kind of makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. It does make sense because it's this is the words that God has given us. I mean, he's and it brings to life. Reading the death of John the Baptist, those saints. My very first case. They said, all right, you're going to be the scribe, right? You're the guy that just takes notes, because I was the only guy there that had I was at the beginning of my studies, but I had Latin. I could understand Latin and Greek. And so I'm reading, I'm just watching and taking notes, and you would see certain hits on certain saints when this saint is called, or, and you get a reaction from the enemy. You made contact, and you know that you've landed punches on certain saints. Other saints, no reaction at all. It's very interesting. Again, it helps you understand the beauty of the mystical body. And then what's interesting too is that every single case that comes to us, there's God always sends help from the mystical body. There's a nemesis, and from the mystical body. I had a young man, 16 years old. He didn't know a single prayer. He could hardly read. Okay. Didn't know a single memorized prayer. Couldn't say the Hail Mary, the Our Father. He claimed to be an indigo, right? Which means this enlightened. It's kind of this Illuminati garbage. And he's got this enlightenment, and he's got these special gifts, and they're to help humanity save humanity. It's all this New Age Gnostic stuff. And so I said, well, that's interesting. Is there any saints cycled into your life lately? And the guy was like, well, I'm reading St. Augustine's Confessions. I'm getting a lot out of it. Wait a minute. You don't even know the Hail Mary, and you're reading Confessions, you see? And so here was a guy, St. Augustine, doctor of the church. Today's second reading was in the office of reading was St. Augustine, doctor of the church. He was a Manichae, which is a Gnostic religion, a false, the Manichaeans were Gnostic in their belief. The Gnostic meaning, this special knowledge, special insight. That's how you're saved, through this, this special insight. St. Irenaeus, we celebrated this week, said he called them the Gnostics, so-called, because they had no knowledge. He said. So here's a guy that had these Gnostic beliefs. This kid that believes he was an indigo, can't say the very basic of prayers, and he's reading, and he can hardly read. Intellectually, he's not a smart kid. I mean, at least not educated. And he's reading St. Augustine's Confessions, which is not an easy read. No. And so here's the demon that's working on this kid. And God says, it's like this, if I did this to you, what does it mean? Give me my left hand, or no, down here, right? Give me my lefty, because I need a closer on this deal. So God sends help from the bullpen, and the mystical body, the saints, they're just warming up, man. They're warming up in the bullpen, stretching out. You guys always, the pitchers always had that jacket with just the throwing arm, because you had to show everybody that you were a pitcher. Yeah, you weren't a regular player. And the saints are up there in heaven, and they're like, they're all warm, and they got the jacket on. They're just kind of waiting, or they're just chilling, throwing a little. Just throwing some light pitches, keeping their arm warm, waiting to be put into the game. And that's how it is when you begin to see the saints are coming, just like the demon said last month. Every time you call her, she comes. Every time you call her. When you see that, or the authority structure, I talk about this in the book. So I talk about the mystical body, invoking the saints, the authority structure, for example. When you see that, when the priest takes his stole and he puts it on a woman, and you get this bodily reaction of pain, right? And then the husband, who's in a state of grace, lays his hand on her body, which he has rights over by through natural law, by merit of the marital debt. He lays his hands, it causes the same bodily reaction. So when we're talking about the authority structure, for example, husbands and wives, this is not just based on DDT, devil defeating theology, St. Thomas and the tradition of the church. This is also the fruit of our work in the field, of seeing the reaction of the demon to the husband's authority. I see it again and again and again. Or the father's blessing. I've seen, again, what we're doing, I'm Nurse Ratchet. We're just doing intakes. We're doing interrogations. We're providing data for the priest so that he goes, we're just hero support. The priests are the heroes, and we're just getting data from them. We're just he's the pitcher, right? I mean, and the pitcher and the catcher, they know the batter. This guy likes, he can't, Serrano can't hit the curveball. We're doing the data on them, And anyway, so that's what the lay associates do, and our part of our observance is like the authority structure. This is real time experience that helps us in spiritual combat, and a lot of these lessons, at least the theory behind it and the practical application, I put in the manual.
Again, the pitching analogy is interesting because many people don't know the game of baseball, and you're thinking, oh, it's so slow. And there's many little working details going on before the pitcher even throws the ball. The game doesn't start till he throws it. He's in charge. Yeah. So you got Doc and all these other guys doing all this other work behind the scenes, moving. This guy's moving this side. This guy's shifting over here before father executes the play.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot happens. A lot happens. And ultimately, I'm the catcher, right? And I'm calling what a pitch I want for you, the pitcher. And then what do? You shake me off. You shake me off. Ultimately, you're the guy throwing the ball. And so the lay
unless you're Crash Davis, then you get up and tell them what's coming.
Yeah, I would always, if you threw two in a row in the dirt and I had to go down and I took it in the thigh or in the chin, I would throw it in the dirt back to the pitcher just to remind you, hey, you might want to raise it up a little bit. That's part of the fun of baseball,
There's a story I can't bring up right now.
We could do a whole show just on baseball and the spiritual life,
Oh yeah, and a lot of guys hate on that, but there are parallels to it. And my thing is, I know my fellow trans get mad at me. I go, man, many of these guys have never played ball before, because if they did, they would be able to do what's needed all the time in a regulated area and not lose their cool when something tough hits, or someone calls them a bad name. They'd be able to, take that and be able to run with it instead of, losing it and go tweet about it or things like that, and maybe cause you to more sin or scandal on interwebs or something like that.
Yeah, it's learning emotional constancy. And that's absolutely critical in spiritual combat is developing constancy, recognizing your triggers. This is why we go into, some of the psychology. I've kind of condensed down into working, a workable form, much of Father's, his book of The Science of Mental Health, and why the emotions are so important. And I borrow a phrase and I use it in the book from Modern Psychology. And it says, if you can name it, talking about the emotions, if you can name it, you can tame it. And so, and how does that apply to the spiritual life? If you can name the vice, you can tame the vice. And you can also tame the demon that's fueling the vice. If you can name the vice of impurity, anger, this is Ignatius, you focus on one fault, and you do your examination, look at your examination through that fault. How did I do with anger today? How did I do with impurity today? But the first thing to do is to name it. You have to be able to struggling with X, and then you can start looking at the roots. And again, I go into this in the book as well, is that you might be focusing, it's like the game whack-a-mole, right? Remember, you take the kids to the mall and you play whack-a-mole, and you hit the mole over here and you got anger. You're going to crush anger. And as soon as you get anger subdued, here comes, the impurity. And even the monastic tradition, the monks are talking about how anger and impurity work hand in hand. And so you might be out here confessing a real carnal sin, and the demon's got you focused on the carnal sin, but there's something much deeper underlying. There's a deeper defect that needs to be worked on. And until you deal with that defect, you've got to, in that defect, you've got a psychological a compatibility, a symbiotic attraction to the demon. You're thinking like the demon, and that attracts him. Like, so if I reject the authority of my bishop, well, that's a diabolic thought. That's a diabolic act. That's something that will attract him. That's something that he will like. If I don't deal with my so-called father wound, right? Well, every demon has a father wound, right? Every demon feels rejected by God the Father. Like, how did you let me do this, even though it was his own free choice? And so getting those areas and squeaky clean virtue-wise is absolutely critical. So, and part of it, going back to the baseball analogy, when you hit a baseball, hitting is, you do the same thing every time. You remember Joe Morgan? Remember? He would even do that little pump, right? He would do the double pump every single time because that's part of the ritual. Rafael Nadal, now he's got other issues, but he does these certain things that he does beforehand. That's part of the ritual. And even the discipline of hitting, maybe Nadal's not a good example, but learning to turn the wrist, turn the hips, to spin, to turn, all those things are absolutely critical. A pitcher throwing it the same way every time. Those are absolutely critical. Those little teeny movements. I'll give you an example. I went to the range and I was zeroing my hunting rifle. I was going to go on a big game, on a deer hunt. And so I had a friend who was a Marine sniper, and he takes me out to the range, and he says, "Hey, I want to show you something." And we were trying to, and I was way off. I'm a terrible shot. I was a helicopter pilot. We just threw rockets or whatever, So
we just pushed the button.
yeah. It was an area fire weapon, and every 7th round was a tracer, So I just follow the green light right up into the target, So he says the real killer on the sniper team is not the shooter, it's the spotter. He said, I'll show you how you can watch the air movement behind the bullet next time we come out. I was like, wow, that's crazy. So then we went to the pistol range where we're going to shoot 1911s because we're military guys, So he shoots, of course, because he's a Marine and he's a sniper, and he hits like, boom, 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 1 hole, 3 bullets. Yeah. I'm all over the place. And he's not even watching me. He's just looking like this. And out of the corner of his eye, he's watching me. And he just says, move your right thumb up 3/4 of an inch. I was like, all right, dude, whatever. So 3/4. Yeah. All right, Marine, let's do it. So I moved my right thumb up 3/4 of an inch, and boom, 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 had a really clean shot group. And I looked at him like, man, what the heck? You're a freak. And he says, no, you're holding it like a wheel gun, like a revolver. Well, he was right, because I was issued the transition. I was issued a revolver. It's what I carried in Iraq. Because I was a pilot, I didn't really need a handgun, So they just gave me a revolver, and that precision is absolutely critical. That 3/4 of an inch meant the difference between hitting my target and not hitting it, just my thumb. And so understanding that in the spiritual combat, the authority structure is key. I explained that, and Father does a great job explaining that. Being in a state of grace is absolutely critical. And once those two are covered, then learning specificity in combat, learning how to pray, how to be specific in your prayer, being specific in your confession, This is very critical. Again, I was struggling with something a while back, and I couldn't put my finger on it, man. I was like, man, I don't know what it is. So I go to confession, and I said, Father, I don't know what it is, man, but I'm kind of lack in prayer. I'm praying, but man, my heart's in the words, and I just feel like tired spiritually all the time, and I'm just describing this malaise, And the priest on the other side of the screen goes, that sounds to me like a sadia, spiritual sloth. And I was like, Father, I want to confess asadia and spiritual sloth. That's exactly what it is. Boom. As soon as I confessed it, it lifted. It was gone. But I had to put it in precise language with the help of this priest, and it totally lifted. And so going into making a good confession is critical. That's why we have a long section of Father Ripperger's examination of conscience in the middle of the book, so that you can look, this is it, this is it, this is it. These are the 3/4 of an inch thumb movements that are absolutely critical. And the same thing. A 1/4 of an inch makes a difference between a strike and a ball, between a pop up and a line drive. These are critical movements in spiritual life as well.
And my fishing coach, he would look at us when we were throwing, and he could tell right after the point the ball left goes high and outside.
Yeah,
just just with the release point of that. So yeah, we had drills where the catcher would, or pitcher we would do it for ourselves. You'd have to hit 10 right here. Then the glove go over 10 right here, 10 down here, 10 right here. So you could, and even like basketball, we would shoot, most people were just, you're just shooting in the hoop. No, you're aiming for that little hook underneath the rim. So that's your target. So if you miss, it goes in the hoop instead of this big wide thing. It's like, it's the movie The Patriot, aim small, miss small.
Yeah.
So you can focus on what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And precision is key, and discipline is key. And this is, again, the fruit of doing the prayers, the protocol prayers, working through this on your own, this manual. I mean, what I'm trying to do is teach precision in combat. And it takes, I want to demystify it, because it's not, there's no secrets to it. You know, it's, I remember during COVID, I'm laying in bed and I piece of paper to my wife, and she's like, "What is that?" And I said, well, she opens it up and it says, litany of the saints to be prayed in times of plague. And she looks at it, and she looked at me, and she looked at it, and she said, "You, my friend, practice smash mouth Catholicism." Like, I love that phrase. I said, I'll give you credit when I use it, but this is what we're talking about: smash mouth Catholicism. We fight an ancient enemy. The ancient weapons are best, you know? And so litanies, rosary, meditation, good deep confessions, good liturgy. This is how we battle back. And this is, and you grind it out at certain times of the day, whether you feel it or not. Whether Nolan Ryan felt like icing down and doing his routine, he did it anyway, because that's what champions do. And we need to be champions in the spiritual life, and there has to be a certain amount of discipline, and then attention to details to the movements. And once you start noticing those attention to detail, those little movements, it makes a difference between a strike and a ball. It makes a difference between overcoming a virtue or struggling with it your whole life. And then it also makes a difference in overcoming a defect and growing in the virtue. And so doing that, you become to grow in perfection in the small little virtue. What is virtue and vice? They're just repeated acts, right? This is Vince Lombardi, gentlemen, this is football, right? Winning is a habit, and so is losing. So it's developing good habits. This is what gets you in position to defeat the enemy, whether it's big or small, whatever you're facing.
As people start, even Father brings up, get up and after you pray, make the bed. Little things like that, grow and do these little things. Get out, after, don't hit the snooze button. Get right up. That first battle. Right.
You lose that. Well, I think Jose Maria Escriva called it the heroic moment, right? The alarm goes off. Do you wait? Do you hit the snooze? Get up immediately. Offer that up. If you don't want to get up, offer it up. I offer this up in atonement for all the times that I was slothful. I offer it up for the priest, for any priest today that's struggling. I offered up for my bishop, offered up for my wife, my kids. You offered up. You get into the shower, the second heroic moment, when you want to feel sorry for yourself and you want to turn your shower into a spa. There's no time for a spa treatment. You're a soldier for Christ. You get wet, you splash and dash, and you get out, So you got to have that soldier-like discipline, an athlete-like discipline. And it goes a long, long way. And that builds you the foundation to go to the next level when you're facing your giants.
Yeah, no, I think that my wife could. You only in there for like a minute. I wasting time. We're in, we're out. Let's go. Can't do the 30-minute stuff.
Yeah. Because again, one of the biggest errors of today that we're tempted to is effeminacy. I mentioned this in the book, and I quote Teresa of Avila. She said, "I want my daughters to be barbada, to be bearded, like soldiers coming off of campaign." She says, "I want you to be so fierce in your pursuit of virtue." And virtus means courage in battle. She says, "I want you to be so mad. I don't want you to be effeminate," meaning like standing on the chair when the mouse walks through the room, effeminate, because effeminacy is a vice, whether it's by a man or a woman. I want you to be so masculine in your pursuit of virtue that you scare the guys, that you scare the men. Espanten los hombres, she said in Spanish. I want you to frighten, terrify men because you're so committed to virtue. She's a doctor of the church and a doctor of prayer, So the pursuit of virtue is absolutely critical. And the difference, again, a curveball, the finger structure, it's absolutely precise. You do it the same way every time. And so having a disciplined prayer life, half the battle. And what our experience is, that the demon responds to the imposition of order as much as to the prayers themselves. So just imposing order, you're going to knock out half the guys that are out there lining up against you just by having a disciplined prayer life in order.
That quote, it made me think of St. Anthony in the desert, that line of him getting beaten up by demons. Goes, God, where were you? He goes, I wanted to see how you would fight.
Yeah. We're losing that masculine aspect. Anything masculine now is toxic, right? Toxic masculinity. Anything Catholic is too Catholic, but where are we? God wants us to fight. It's like St. John Vianney said that the devil is like a dog, like Foghorn Leghorn. He's like a dog with an 8-foot chain. And most people that come to the church for help have voluntarily, or someone else, their parents, or they were abused, they were thrown inside of within the 8-foot radius of that dog. But every once in a while, God says, all right, Steve, boom, he just kicks you in, and like the first time I jumped out of an airplane, there's always one guy that gets the boot. Like, you're going you're going, either whether you will it or not, you're going out of that door, buddy. And so God sometimes does that. He gives you the boot on the backside. He puts you in there just to teach you how to do battle. And again, at the end of the day, the demon is the instrument of our sanctification, and we are the instrument of his torture. You want to torture the demon? Offer your suffering up for the man who abused you. Offer your suffering up for the church, for the bishop, for your pastor. Offer it up for your children, whatever. Start learning to offer your suffering up. And this is spiritual judo that is very, very effective. But sometimes God throws us into the 8-foot chain to teach us how to fight.
What do you mean? That's some scripture line of pray for your enemies? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, there's
crazy idea.
These crazy ideas. Pray for your enemies. Yeah. Or in Romans, that we are children of God, and we have the Spirit of God, if only we suffer. Right? It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Let's just cut that phrase off. For to you it was appointed not only to believe, but to suffer for the name of Christ. I rejoice in my suffering, for in my body I make up what's lacking in the suffering of Christ's body, which is the church. There's a whole lot of scriptures in there. I wouldn't have written it this way, right?
Or St. Paul,
I wouldn't design the economy of salvation that involves so much pain.
Or St. Stephen praying for your enemies. In modern day, it'd be St. Stephen getting up and having vengeance and taking them all down like John Wick.
Yeah, exactly. We would have exactly. But what does Stephen mean? The Greek word Stephanos means crown. I mean, the first one to win the martyr's crown. And when do we celebrate? Well, ironically, we celebrate in the genius of the church's liturgical calendar, St. Stephen, right after Christmas. Holy Innocents, and then St. Stephen, the first one to suffer for this newborn king and offer himself as martyroi, as witness to the divinity of Christ. I mean, it's so rich. Just like the soldiers in the Roman army would get the first guy over the wall would get what's called the corona murialis, the crown of the wall. And the first guy that got over, there's a very good chance that those things were issued posthumously, because the first guy over is the first guy that they're going to converge on. Because once you breach that wall, then the rest of the guys can then the whole place has been breached. And so that's a very key crown. And so our first martyr, Stephen, whose name means crown, Stephanos, right, in Greek. So this is what it means to be Christian. Jesus put three conditions on it. He said, if you wish to be my disciple, there's 3 things, and the Greek construction implies that they are an ongoing and continual. Then if you underline the geek as a geek, you must continually deny yourself, continually pick up your cross, and continually follow me. And when we accept that, this is Christianity. Now you're starting to get to the 3/4 inch thumb movement. This is where we're perfection, and we grow in virtue. And again, do as I say and not as I do, Steve, because this is tough. This is tough, hard-nosed baseball spirituality. This is mixed martial arts spirituality, and it's a grind.
Because for not for the love of the game, but a league of their own. It's supposed to be tough.
Yeah, this is baseball. There's no crying in baseball.
Well, that too.
Yeah, it's supposed to be tough,
But I mean, if it's tough to play ball, if it's tough to get on a team, if it's tough to make the starting lineup, why do we think it's going to be a piece of cake? I mean, it is kind of a piece. We have the tools, we have the blueprints for salvation to get to heaven. But why do we think it's supposed to be an easy road? I think our Lord, the Greek for agonize, it's climb up, straight, get up there. As one priest says, not some mamby-pamby idea. It's
Yeah.
grueling, agonizing to get up on the top of that hill.
Yeah. Agonizo, it also means to wrestle, contend.
Yeah.
Agatha and agony is Saint Agatha in Rome, the church there, where she was thrown into the gladiator locker room naked, right, and then put on the street, and she was martyred there in Rome, and the church builders where she wrestled, Agatha and agonia and agonizo. She battled, she contended her life for the truth of the gospel. God's not going to ask us, most likely, to offer that kind of martyrdom, but he is asking us to do this other martyrdom, to learn to walk the lives of the Christian. And we're going to need to do that today in today's climate. It's becoming really, really dark. As Father Ripperger says, we live in a time of diabolic disorientation. And so we need to battle back with the ancient weapons. And part of that is learning to agonizo, to do combat, right? Remember in confirmation, and actually still in traditional ritual, after the bishop confirms you, boom. It's not like, hey, wake up, stop daydreaming. It's like, hey, this is a battle. That's a symbolic gesture. You're entering into you're now a combatant. I remember we work with priests, I remember talking to this priest, and he was saying, oh man, I don't want to do spiritual combat because I don't want a target on my back. So the next day I went to daily mass down at the fraternity parish, and the priest has got his fiddle back, right? And on the fiddle back, he's doing the elevation, and he's got the Greek chi, a big red Greek chi, and it's this huge, the Greek chi is an X, and the capital is this huge red X. And I thought, there it is. There's your mark. When you prostrated before a bishop of the living God and were ordained a priest of the living God with the indelible mark that will never be removed, a priest forever, you became a target, right? When you and I made the profession before the church to love and serve, etc., and our marital vows, we became a target. Our marriage became a target. We're all a target. It's what are you going to do about it? That's the question.
It was that line, you might not be interested in the war, but the war is interested in you.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, the book is The Liber Christo Method, a field manual for spiritual combat. Again, it will be underneath in the show notes, somewhere that way, underneath wherever you're looking. And I also have the link for Liber Christo if you guys want to check that out, because they also have videos that you could watch, obviously in the drop-down video section. Doc, thank you for coming on. Any final words?
No, I appreciate everything you're doing. I think you're doing good work for the Lord, and we need to just keep getting the message out there. Keep staying positive. Keep hammering away. Just keep grinding it out, because this is what
keep pounding is what we say here.
Ground and pound. That's what it is. And the spiritual life really is ground and pound. It's just grind it out. It's smash mouth. It's just keep grinding it out, and do it. You do you, and you do your thing, and I do mine, and I'm just very grateful that God put us together, and I'm grateful for what you're doing.
Appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Okay, brother.